The flashing red and blue light suddenly appeared in the rearview mirror, completely unprovoked. Sergeant Harlan Crow believed he had pulled over yet another driver who seemed out of place in his affluent, predominantly white town. A smirk crossed his face as he prepared to humiliate the man behind the wheel of the brand new Mercedes. He mocked the driver's claims of being a lawyer, laughing at the expensive suit and impressive credentials. But Sergeant Crow was about to receive a career-ending lesson. The man he had illegally detained was the newly sworn-in state Attorney General. Late at night, Marcus Langford let out a long, slow breath, rolling his broad shoulders against the pristine leather of the driver's seat in his midnight blue Mercedes S-Class. It had been a demanding period filled with press conferences, endless meetings, and a mountain of case files left by his predecessor. Now that he had reached the pinnacle of his career in public service after years of prosecuting corrupt officials and fighting systemic injustice, all Marcus wanted was the quiet sanctuary of his own home. He was driving through the town of Crestview, a notoriously wealthy and manicured suburb bordering the state capital. Crestview was the kind of place where property taxes were exorbitant, the neighborhood watch overly zealous, and the local police department operated like a private security force for the country club elite. Marcus knew the town's reputation well. During his earlier years as a civil rights litigator, he had received multiple complaints about the Crestview Police Department's habit of racially profiling drivers who passed through its pristine streets. The streetlights cast rhythmic, sweeping shadows across Marcus's face as he drove strictly at the posted speed limit. He wore a charcoal custom-tailored suit, though his tie was loosened and his collar unbuttoned. Beside him on the passenger seat sat a heavy, scuffed leather briefcase bulging with confidential state documents. He was nearing the interstate on-ramp when the darkness behind him was suddenly shattered by the strobe of police lights. Red and blue violently illuminated the interior of the Mercedes. Marcus glanced in the rearview mirror. A Crestview police cruiser was riding his bumper aggressively close. Marcus did not panic. He did not swerve. A cold, familiar numbness washed over him, a feeling he had known since his teenage years driving through the city. No matter how many degrees he held, no matter how much authority he wielded in the courtroom, in the dead of night under the harsh glare of police sirens, he was stripped of his titles. He was simply a black man in a very expensive car in a neighborhood where some people believed he did not belong. Methodically, Marcus engaged his turn signal. He bypassed a dark, narrow shoulder and drove a short distance farther to pull into the well-lit parking lot of a closed pharmacy. It was a habit born of survival: always pull over where there is light and, ideally, cameras. He placed the Mercedes in park, turned off the engine, and rolled down all four windows. This was another calculated move to show complete transparency. He placed both of his large hands at the 10 and 2 positions on the steering wheel and waited. In the side mirror, Marcus watched the heavy door of the police cruiser swing open. Out stepped Sergeant Harlan Crow. Crow was a hulking man, a veteran of the force, who wore his uniform slightly too tight to emphasize his chest. He walked with a slow, exaggerated swagger, his hand resting casually on the butt of his service weapon. Crow had spent his career in a town where the biggest crimes were teenagers stealing golf carts and housewives driving under the influence of prescription pills. Yet he carried himself like a soldier in a war zone. Behind him, the passenger door opened and a much younger, thinner officer stepped out. This was Officer Reed Lawson, a rookie who had been on the force for only a short time. Lawson looked nervous, hanging back by the cruiser's headlights and holding a large, heavy-duty flashlight. Crow approached the driver's side of the Mercedes. He did not go to the window immediately. Instead, he stopped at the trunk, deliberately pressing his thumb against the taillight to leave a fingerprint, an old-school tactic in case the driver fled. He then shone his blinding tactical flashlight directly into the side mirror, intending to blind the driver before stepping up to the window. "Evening," Crow said, the word dragging out with a condescending drawl. He kept the blinding beam pointed directly at Marcus's eyes. "Good evening, officer," Marcus replied. His voice was a deep, calm baritone, the exact tone he used when cross-examining a hostile witness, unshaken, unbothered. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" Crow asked, leaning in slightly. His eyes darted around the luxurious interior of the vehicle, taking in the ambient lighting, the pristine leather, and the expensive briefcase. "I have absolutely no idea, officer," Marcus said smoothly, blinking against the harsh light. "I was maintaining the speed limit. My registration is current, and all my lights are functioning." "Perhaps you could illuminate me." Crow let out a short, humorless chuckle. He did not like the vocabulary or the tone. Most drivers, especially minorities pulled over in Crestview, were stammering, nervous, or immediately defensive. Marcus sat there as if he were holding court. "You failed to maintain your lane," Crow lied without missing a beat. "You crossed the solid yellow line back by the Elm Street intersection." "I did not," Marcus stated simply. It was not an argument but a statement of objective fact. "I maintained a steady lane, but if you feel a citation is necessary, I will gladly accept it and address it in court." Crow's jaw tightened. "License, registration, and proof of insurance. My wallet is in my inside left suit jacket pocket." Marcus narrated his movements clearly and slowly. "My registration and insurance are in the glove compartment. I'm going to reach for my wallet first. Just get the ID, buddy. And let's not make any sudden moves," Crow sneered. His hand gripping his duty belt, Marcus slowly reached into his jacket and retrieved his leather wallet. He pulled out his standard state driver's license. He had not yet received his newly minted Attorney General credentials, which were still being processed, but his standard license was perfectly valid. He handed it to Crow. Crow snatched it and shone the flashlight onto the plastic card. He read the name, Marcus Langford. He looked from the ID to Marcus, then back. "This your car, Marcus?" "It is," Marcus replied. "A brand new S-Class," Crow noted, his voice laced with heavy skepticism. "This runs what, 130 grand? You must have a pretty good job, Marcus." "What is it you do?" "I work for the state," Marcus answered neutrally. He was not going to play his hand yet. He wanted to see exactly how far Crow was willing to take this violation of protocol. "The state." Crow let out a loud barking laugh. "What? You drive a bus? Or are you a chauffeur? Because usually, when I see a guy like you in a car like this, he's either driving his boss around or he borrowed it without asking." Marcus's grip on the steering wheel tightened just a fraction, the leather creaking softly under his knuckles. The racial implication was entirely unveiled. "I can assure you, officer, the vehicle belongs to me. If you run the plates, you will see it is registered in my name," Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave, carrying the lethal chill of a coming storm. Crow did not like the chill in Marcus's voice. Cops like him thrived on fear. They fed on the anxiety of the people they subjugated. When a citizen refused to be intimidated, it felt like an attack on his very identity. Crow tapped the driver's license against his chin. "You know, Marcus, there's been a string of burglaries in the upscale neighborhoods around here. High-end electronics, jewelry, and you're out here driving through a town you don't live in at this hour of the night." "I am traveling home from my office in the capital," Marcus said, his eyes locking onto Crow's. "Is it a crime in Crestview to utilize public roads after dark?" "Don't get smart with me, Bo," Crow snapped, the word cracking like a whip in the cold night air. Marcus went completely still. In his mind, a precise and unforgiving file was being opened. Sergeant Harlan Crow was no longer just an annoyance. He was a liability to the badge he wore. And Marcus was the chief law enforcement officer of the entire state. "Officer," Marcus said, his tone dangerously polite, "I highly recommend you maintain a professional demeanor. Step out of the car," Crow ordered immediately, taking a step back and unhooking the safety strap on his holster from the back of the cruiser. The young rookie, Lawson, jawed forward. "Sarge, everything okay?" Lawson asked, his voice cracking slightly. "Get over to the passenger side, Lawson. Keep an eye on him," Crow barked. "I told you to step out of the vehicle, Marcus. Under Pennsylvania versus Mims, you do have the authority to order me out of the vehicle during a lawful traffic stop," Marcus recited flawlessly, referencing the Supreme Court case. "However, I will note for the record that this stop is predicated on a fabricated traffic violation, and your subsequent line of questioning implies a baseless investigatory detention, entirely devoid of reasonable articulable suspicion." Crow paused, his eyes narrowing. The legal jargon hit him like a physical blow, momentarily short-circuiting his aggression. "What the hell are you babbling about?" Marcus smoothly opened his door and stepped out into the night air. Standing well over 6 feet tall, he was taller than Crow, and in his impeccably tailored suit he cut an imposing figure. He calmly closed the car door behind him and crossed his arms over his chest. "I am not babbling, Sergeant. I am explicitly stating my rights," Marcus said, looking down slightly at the officer. Crow puffed out his chest, stepping into Marcus's personal space to intimidate him. "You think you're some kind of lawyer? I am an attorney." "Yes," Marcus replied. Crow let out a loud, ugly laugh, turning to his rookie. "You hear that, Lawson? We got ourselves a lawyer. Johnny Cochran, over here." He turned back to Marcus, a vicious smirk on his face. "Where did you get your law degree, Marcus?" "Printed off the internet. One of those online universities where you pay $100 and they mail you a certificate. Let me guess you do slip-hand falls for a strip mall firm." "I received my Juris Doctorate from Columbia Law School," Marcus answered. "Graduated magna cum laude, right? And I'm the King of England," Crow mocked. He shone his flashlight down at Marcus's hands, then at his pockets. "You got any weapons on you? Any needles? Any drugs?" "I am unarmed." "I do not use narcotics," Marcus said. "Put your hands on the hood of the car," Crow commanded. "Are you conducting a Terry frisk?" Marcus asked, not moving. "Because to do so, you must have a reasonable suspicion that I am armed and presently dangerous. Given that I have been nothing but compliant and have identified myself as an officer of the court." "You have no such suspicion. I have suspicion that you're resisting my lawful orders," Crow shouted, his face turning red. "Hands on the hood now, or I will put you on the ground and place you in handcuffs." Across the hood, Officer Lawson looked terrified. Sarge, maybe we should just run his license and give him a warning." "He's not doing anything." "Shut up, Lawson," Crow snapped. "This guy is a smart aleck who thinks his fancy vocabulary means he doesn't have to listen to the police." Hands on the hood. Marcus considered his options. He could end this right now by simply stating his title. But he knew something crucial. If Crow was doing this to him, he was doing it to teenagers, to single mothers, to people who did not have Columbia law degrees and the power of the state behind them. Marcus needed to see the full extent of Crow's corruption. He needed Crow to dig his grave so deep he could never climb out. Slowly, deliberately, Marcus turned and placed his hands flat on the hood of his own car. Crow smirked triumphantly. He stepped up behind Marcus and kicked his legs apart roughly. Crow's hands moved over Marcus's suit, patting him down with unnecessary force. He checked the waistline, the ankles, and the pockets. Crow pulled out Marcus's cell phone and set it on the hood. Then he patted the right side of the jacket and felt something rigid. He reached his hand inside Marcus's suit jacket. "Do not reach into my pockets," Marcus warned, his voice like grinding granite. "A Terry frisk only allows for a pat-down of the outer clothing to check for weapons. You do not have probable cause to search my interior pockets. I feel a hard object. Could be a weapon." Crow lied again, shoving his hand into Marcus's inner pocket. He pulled it out. It was not a weapon. It was a thick, heavy leather badge wallet. Crow did not open it immediately. He just stared at the fine leather, flipping it over in his hand. "What's this, Marcus? You got a fake badge in here. You playing dress up?" "That is my official identification," Marcus said, his hand still resting on the hood. "I strongly suggest you open it and read it very carefully." The parking lot of the pharmacy was dead quiet, save for the low, rhythmic hum of the police cruiser's engine and the distant sound of highway traffic. The strobe lights washed over the three men, casting an eerie, pulsating glow. Officer Lawson, standing on the other side of the Mercedes, swallowed hard. His instincts were screaming that something was terribly wrong. The man they had pulled over was not acting like a criminal caught in a lie. He was acting like a predator allowing a trap to snap shut around its prey. "Open it, Sarge," Lawson called out, his voice shaking. "Just look at the ID. I am aware of that, Officer Lawson," Marcus said, keeping his gaze locked on Crow. "Your sergeant here decided to initiate a traffic stop without probable cause. He then lied about a traffic violation, illegally detained me, verbally abused me with racially charged language, and conducted an illegal search of my personnel while you stood by and watched." Lawson looked like he was about to be sick. "Sir, I'm just a rookie. He's my training officer." "I know," Marcus said smoothly, "which is why you are currently in a position to salvage your own career. Depending entirely on what happens in the next few minutes, Marcus finally reached out and smoothly plucked his wallet from Crow's loose, shaking grip. He tucked it back into his breast pocket. "Sergeant Crow," Marcus said, saying the name like it was a disease. "You asked me earlier if I knew why you pulled me over. I believe I have the answer now." Sergeant Harlan Crow's world was crumbling in real time. The humid night air suddenly felt thick, suffocating as if all the oxygen had been vacuumed out of the deserted pharmacy parking lot. The flashing strobe of the red and blue lights, usually a symbol of his absolute authority, now felt like the harsh glare of an interrogation room. Crow tried to speak, but his tongue felt like a block of lead. "Sir, Attorney General Lanford," he stammered, his voice an octave higher than it had been a moment ago. "This is a massive misunderstanding, a terrible misunderstanding. I thought you matched the description of a suspect we've been looking for." "A suspect," Marcus Lanford repeated, his voice dangerously calm. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "A suspect in a string of high-end burglaries, as you claimed earlier." "Describe this suspect to me, Sergeant. What was the height, the weight, the vehicle make and model? And do not lie to me, because tomorrow I will have my deputies audit every dispatch log and bolo alert issued by your department in recent times." Crow swallowed, a drop of cold sweat tracing a path down his thick neck. "He was a black male, sir, driving a luxury sedan. So your articulable reasonable suspicion for pulling me over, detaining me, and threatening me with felony charges was that I am a black man in a Mercedes," Marcus stated, stripping away the thin veneer of police jargon to expose the raw, undeniable racism beneath. "You didn't see me cross the yellow line. You didn't smell drugs. You saw a black man in an expensive car, and your immediate assumption was that I was either a criminal, a chauffeur, or a fraud." Crow held up his hands in a placating gesture, completely abandoning his tough guy persona. "No, sir. Not at all. We just have to be thorough out here in Crestview. We have a duty to the residents. It was just a routine check. Professional courtesy, right?" Cop to cop, Marcus's eyes narrowed into terrifying slits. "Do not ever equate yourself to me, Sergeant, and do not insult my intelligence by calling this a routine check. You remind me of a case I prosecuted years ago, a dirty detective named Gregory Matthews in the 6th Precinct. He also thought a badge shielded him from federal civil rights laws. He used the exact same thoroughness excuse when he was caught planting evidence. Matthews is currently serving time in a federal penitentiary. Do you know who put him there, Harlan?" Crow's knees physically wobbled. He knew the Matthews case. Every cop in the state knew it. It was the case that had made Marcus Langford famous, earning him a reputation as a relentless prosecutor of corruption. "You did, sir," Crow whispered, his spirit entirely broken. "Exactly," Marcus said. He turned his attention to the young rookie standing by the cruiser's bumper. "Officer Lawson." Lawson snapped to attention, looking like a deer in headlights. "Yes, Attorney General. Is your Axon body camera currently recording?" Marcus asked. Lawson looked down at his chest. The small black device had a glowing red ring around the lens. "Yes, sir. It's been recording since we initiated the stop. Audio and video." Marcus turned back to Crow. He looked at the sergeant's chest. The camera was there, but there was no red light. "Yours is turned off, Sergeant Crow. A convenient mechanical failure or deliberate violation of departmental policy during a traffic stop. The battery was dying, sir," Crow lied, though his voice cracked on the final word. "Officer Lawson," Marcus commanded, "go to your cruiser. Secure the dashcam footage. Do not let it overwrite. Do not turn it off. And do not let Sergeant Crow anywhere near that vehicle." "Understood." "Understood, sir," Lawson said, scrambling backward to the cruiser and practically diving into the passenger seat to guard the dashcam. Marcus reached into his tailored pants pocket and pulled out his cell phone. The screen illuminated his stern features. He scrolled through his contacts, bypassing the governor and state senators, and tapped a number. He put the phone on speaker, holding it out so Crow could hear every ring. The line rang several times before a groggy, deep voice answered. "Henderson, Chief Victor Harlan," Marcus said clearly. "This is State Attorney General Marcus Langford." There was loud rustling on the other end, the sound of a man practically falling out of bed. "Attorney General, sir?" Good Lord, what time is it? Is there an emergency? There is a significant situation, Victor, Marcus said, keeping his eyes locked on the sweating tail face of Sergeant Crow. I am currently standing in the closed pharmacy parking lot on Elm Street, right here in Crestview. I am being detained by 2 of your officers. Detained. Chief Harlan's voice shot up in panic. Sir, you've been detained by my men for what? That is exactly the question I've been asking Sergeant Harlan Crow, Marcus replied. He pulled me over under the fabricated pretense of a lane violation. He then mocked my profession, demanded I step out of the vehicle without lawful justification, illegally patted me down, and threatened me with jail time. I believe he was fully prepared to arrest me until he illegally searched my breast pocket and found my Attorney General badge. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the phone line. When Chief Harlan finally spoke, he sounded breathless. Sir, please tell me you are joking. I do not joke about the Fourth Amendment, Chief, Marcus said coldly. And I certainly do not joke about your officers treating the citizens of this state like second-class subjects. I want you down here, now. I am leaving my house this second. Sir, please, Attorney General Lanford, just hold tight. I will handle this. The line clicked dead. Marcus lowered his phone and slid it back into his pocket. He looked at Crow, who was now visibly trembling, his chest heaving as he gasped for air. The arrogant predator from minutes earlier had been completely erased, replaced by a terrified man realizing his career, his pension, and his freedom were disintegrating before his eyes. Sir, please, Crow begged, taking a step forward. I have a wife. I have a family. If I lose this job, I lose everything. It was a mistake. Just let me write you a warning and we can all go home. Please? Sir, you should have thought of your family before you violated your oath. Crow, Marcus replied, his voice devoid of any sympathy. Did you think about the families of the young men you've terrorized on this stretch of road? Did you think about their futures when you slapped handcuffs on them for driving through your town? Marcus turned his back on the pleading officer, walking calmly toward the passenger side of his Mercedes. He opened the door and reached inside, grasping the handle of his stuffed leather briefcase. He hoisted it out, placed it gently on the roof of his car, and snapped the brass locks open. You see, Harlan, Marcus said without looking up, rummaging through the neat stacks of legal documents, tonight wasn't just a random encounter. It's funny how fate works, isn't it? Crow frowned, confusion mixing with his terror. What do you mean, sir? Moments later, the screech of tires shattered the suburban quiet. An unmarked black Ford Explorer vaulted over the curb of the pharmacy parking lot, coming to a violent halt behind a police cruiser. The driver's door flew open and Chief Victor Harlan scrambled out. Harlan was a man who usually prided himself on his immaculate public appearance. Tonight he was a mess pajama pants tucked into unlaced boots, a department windbreaker thrown haphazardly over a white undershirt. He was red-faced, panting, and sweating profusely. He practically sprinted past Officer Lawson, who was standing at rigid attention by the cruiser, and marched directly up to Sergeant Crow, before Crow could even open his mouth to explain. Chief Harlan shoved him backward by the chest. Shut your mouth, Crow, Harlan roared, his voice echoing off the brick walls of the pharmacy. Don't say a single damn word. Hand me your sidearm, now. Chief, please, Crow pleaded. Your weapon. Harlan, the chief barked. With shaking hands, Crow unholstered his Glock and handed it over, handle first. Harlan snatched it, then pointed a trembling finger at the curb. Go sit on the curb. Do not move. Do not speak. Crow, thoroughly broken, slumped over to the concrete curb and sat down. Burying his face in his hands, Chief Harlan took a deep breath, trying to compose himself, and turned to face Marcus Lanford. The Attorney General was leaning casually against the side of his Mercedes, his hands in his pockets, the open leather briefcase resting on the roof beside him. Attorney General Lanford, Harlan said, his voice dropping to an incredibly respectful, almost begging tone. He walked forward, extending a hand. Sir, I cannot begin to apologize for this. This is an absolute disgrace. I promise you, Sergeant Crow will be suspended without pay immediately, pending a full internal affairs investigation. He will be stripped of his badge. Marcus did not take the chief's hand. He simply stared at it, until Harlan awkwardly lowered it to his sigh. "An internal affairs investigation, Victor?" Marcus asked, his tone mild but laced with razor-sharp intent. "You want to handle this in-house? You think sweeping one bad apple under the rug is going to solve my problem with the Crestview Police Department?" Harlan blanched. "Sir, Crow is a rogue officer. He acted entirely outside of departmental policy. Stop lying to me, Victor," Marcus cut in, his voice cracking like a whip. He reached into his open briefcase and pulled out a thick, heavily tagged manila folder. He tossed it onto the hood of his Mercedes. It landed with a heavy, authoritative thud. Harlan stared at the folder. "What is that, sir?" For quite some time, Marcus began, his voice taking on the rhythmic, commanding cadence of a prosecutor laying out a closing argument. "Long before I was sworn in as Attorney General, I was operating as the lead district attorney for this district. During that time, my office began receiving a highly disproportionate number of complaints regarding racial profiling, illegal searches, and civil rights violations stemming from traffic stops in Crestview." Harlan's eyes widened. He looked from the folder to Marcus, suddenly realizing the ground beneath him was crumbling. "We brought in the state's Civil Rights Enforcement Division," Marcus continued. "Under the direction of Special Prosecutor Elias Grant, we began quietly pulling your department's traffic data. The numbers were staggering. African American and Hispanic drivers account for a small percentage of the traffic traveling through Crestview, yet they account for the vast majority of your night shift traffic stops and vehicle searches. Sir, statistics can be misconstrued." Harlan tried to interject, though he sounded weak. "We patrol a high-traffic corridor." "I am not finished," Marcus snapped, silencing the chief instantly. "We didn't just look at statistics. We looked at the why. We subpoenaed internal emails. We interviewed former officers who were forced out for not playing ball. We discovered that your department operates an unwritten quota and containment policy. You explicitly instruct your night shift officers to pull over minorities driving expensive vehicles under the pretext of looking for burglary suspects. You incentivize it." Harlan's face lost all its color. He looked like a man who had just been handed a terminal diagnosis. "Attorney General, you can't possibly believe I sanctioned." "I know you sanctioned it, Victor," Marcus said coldly. "We have the sworn testimonies. We have the data. The only thing my office was lacking before I took my new oath was indisputable, first-hand, high-definition evidence of this policy being executed in real time by one of your senior training officers, without any extenuating circumstances." Marcus gestured to the open, pristine parking lot, to Crow sitting on the curb, to the flashing lights. "Which brings me to tonight," Marcus said, a grim, satisfied smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The realization hit Chief Harlan like a physical blow. He staggered back half a step. Down on the curb, Crow lifted his head, his jaw dropping as the pieces clicked together. "You didn't just happen to get pulled over," Harlan whispered, horrified. "No, I did not," Marcus confirmed. "I have an apartment in the capital. I could have stayed there tonight, but instead, I chose to drive my brand new S-Class through the heart of Crestview late at night, going exactly the speed limit. I made myself the bait. I wanted to see if your officers were truly as brazen as the investigation suggested." Marcus pointed a finger at Crow, and Sergeant Crow here performed exactly as predicted. He took the bait, hook, line, and sinker. He lied about a traffic violation. He mocked my education. He illegally detained me. And thankfully, Officer Lawson's body camera and the cruiser's dashcam captured every single unconstitutional second of it. Chief Harlan rubbed his face with both hands, letting out a long, defeated groan. He was looking at federal indictments. He was looking at a complete Department of Justice takeover of his police force. "So, Chief Harlan," Marcus said, closing his briefcase with a sharp, decisive click, "we are not going to do an internal affairs investigation, because as of this moment, the Crestview Police Department is under a sweeping civil rights probe by the state Attorney General's office. Sergeant Crow is not going to be suspended. He is going to be arrested." "Arrested?" Crow cried out from the curb, scrambling to his feet. "Sir, you can't, Chief, tell him, under Section 242 of Title 18, Marcus recited, his voice echoing in the night, "deprivation of rights under color of law. It is a federal crime, He looked at the chief. "Victor, you are going to take your handcuffs off your belt. And you are going to arrest your sergeant right now, or I will call the state police barracks. Have them come down here, and they will arrest both of you." Harlan did not hesitate. Survival instinct kicked in. He turned to Crow, pulling his steel cuffs from the back of his belt. "Hands behind your back, Harlan," Harlan ordered, his voice devoid of emotion. "Chief, please, we're brothers." "I was just doing what you told us to do," Crow screamed, tears finally spilling down his cheeks as he backed away. "Do not make me use force, Harlan." "Give me your hands," the chief demanded, stepping forward and grabbing Crow's wrist, twisting it violently behind his back. The sharp click of the ratcheting metal echoed loudly in the quiet night. Marcus watched impassively as the veteran, the arrogant bully of Crestview, was reduced to a sobbing, handcuffed mess in the middle of the parking lot. Marcus then turned his gaze to the rookie. Officer Lawson was standing perfectly still, terrified to even breathe. "Officer Lawson," Marcus said. "Sir?" Lawson squeaked. "In the morning, you are going to report to the state attorney general's office in the Capitol," Marcus instructed. "You are going to sit down with Special Prosecutor Elias Grant, and you are going to give a full, sworn, unredacted statement about everything you have seen and heard during your time in this department. If you are entirely truthful, you will keep your badge. If you omit a single detail to protect these men, you will share a cell with them. Do we have an understanding?" Lawson nodded frantically. "Yes, sir. Absolutely, sir. I'll tell you everything." Marcus Lanford adjusted his suit jacket, picked up his briefcase, and opened the door of his Mercedes. He looked back one last time, the flashing lights, the handcuffed sergeant, and the ruined police chief. "Good night, gentlemen," Marcus said. "I'll see you in court." Later that morning, the sun had barely crested the horizon over the state capitol, casting long golden rays against the limestone pillars of the Department of Justice building. But Attorney General Marcus Langford had already been at his desk for some time. The pristine charcoal suit from the night before had been replaced by a sharp navy pinstripe, his armor for the coming war. At the appointed hour, the heavy oak doors to Marcus's office swung open. In walked Special Prosecutor Elias Grant, flanked by FBI Special Agent Derek Shaw of the Public Corruption Unit, trailing nervously behind them. Clutching a styrofoam coffee cup as if his life depended on it, was Officer Reed Lawson. "Good morning, Attorney General," Grant said, setting a thick stack of fresh transcripts on Marcus's desk. "Officer Lawson has been incredibly cooperative. He's been talking since early this morning." Marcus looked up, his expression unreadable. He gestured to the plush leather chairs opposite his desk. "Sit down, Officer Lawson. Tell me exactly what you told Special Agent Shaw." Lawson swallowed hard, sinking into the chair. "Sir, it's worse than just racial profiling. The stops, they weren't just about harassment. It was a revenue-generating operation. Chief Harlan and Mayor Everett Sloan called it Operation Night Watch, off the books. They specifically targeted out-of-town minorities driving luxury vehicles because they assumed those drivers wouldn't have the local connections to fight back in Crestview's municipal court." Agent Shaw leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. "It gets deeper, Marcus. Lawson provided us with the location of an off-site server where the department kept a secondary ledger. Crow and a handful of other senior officers were utilizing civil asset forfeiture laws to seize cash, jewelry, and sometimes the vehicles themselves, claiming they were suspected proceeds of narcotics trafficking. But there were no drugs. The Crestview municipal government was funneling that seized money into the town's general fund to pay for new country club renovations and the mayor's re-election campaign." Marcus's eyes narrowed into dangerous slits. This was not just a case of a few racist cops playing cowboy on a night shift. This was a highly organized systemic criminal enterprise operating under the color of law. Sergeant Crow had not just been searching for a fake badge in Marcus's suit, he had been searching for cash to steal. "Get the warrants," Marcus ordered, his voice vibrating with absolute authority. "I want the Crestview Police Department locked down. I want Mayor Everett Sloan's financial records frozen. And I want federal agents kicking down the doors of Crestview City Hall before their morning coffee gets cold." By midday, the affluent, quiet suburb of Crestview was the epicenter of a media earthquake. Satellite trucks from every major news network jammed the manicured streets. Overhead, news helicopters circled like vultures. At the scheduled time, Attorney General Marcus Langford stepped up to the podium in the state capitol press briefing room. The blinding flash of hundreds of cameras illuminated the room as he adjusted the microphones. "Good afternoon," Marcus began, his booming baritone demanding absolute silence. "Last night I personally initiated an undercover integrity test within the jurisdiction of the Crestview Police Department. What that operation uncovered was a sickening systemic rot that reaches the highest levels of the city's leadership. As of this morning, under the joint efforts of the State Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Crestview Police Chief Victor Harlan, Mayor Everett Sloan, and Sergeant Harlan Crow have been placed under federal arrest." A collective gasp echoed through the press corps, followed by an immediate eruption of shouted questions. Marcus held up a hand, silencing them instantly. "They are facing a multi-count indictment," Marcus continued, "including conspiracy to violate civil rights, extortion under color of official right, and wire fraud. The badge is a symbol of public trust. When men like Harlan Crow and Victor Harlan pervert that trust into a weapon of racial terror and financial extortion, they cease to be law enforcement officers. They become an organized crime syndicate, and in this state, we dismantle syndicates." In the months that followed, the sweeping architecture of the federal district court in the Capitol felt less like a building and more like a cathedral of judgment. The Honorable Judge Desmond Langford, a man known for his merciless sentencing of corrupt officials, presided over the courtroom with a stare that could freeze boiling water. Sitting at the defense table, wearing a brightly colored, ill-fitting jail jumpsuit, was Harlan Crow. He had aged years in the span of months. His muscular frame had deflated, his broad shoulders slumped in absolute defeat. His arrogant swagger had been entirely eradicated, replaced by the hollow, terrified stare of a man who realized his life was over. The twists in the case had been rapid and devastating. Chief Victor Harlan, terrified of dying in a federal penitentiary, had immediately turned state's witness. He had handed the prosecution everything. They needed to completely destroy Mayor Everett Sloan and Sergeant Harlan Crow. Harlan's testimony confirmed that Crow was the primary enforcer of Operation Night Watch, personally responsible for hundreds of illegal searches and numerous fraudulent civil asset forfeitures. Because of the overwhelming evidence, including the damning dashcam footage of Crow mocking and illegally searching the state attorney General, Crow's defense attorneys had practically begged for a plea deal. Marcus Langford, seated at the prosecution table in a flawless gray suit, stood up as Judge Desmond Langford called for sentencing. "Mr. Langford, does the state wish to make a final statement?" Judge Langford asked, adjusting his reading glasses. "We do, Your Honor," Marcus replied. He walked out from behind the table and approached the podium. He did not look at the judge. He turned his body slightly, locking his piercing gaze directly onto Harlan Crow. Crow flinched, unable to meet Marcus's eyes, staring instead at his shackled hands. "Some time ago," Marcus's voice rang out, clear and steady, "the defendant pulled me over in the dead of night. He looked at my vehicle, he looked at the color of my skin, and he made a calculation. He calculated that I was vulnerable. He calculated that because of who he was and because of the badge he wore, he could strip me of my dignity, my constitutional rights, and my freedom with absolute impunity." Marcus paused, letting the silence hang heavy in the massive courtroom. "The defendant asked me where I got my law degree," Marcus continued. "He mocked the very idea that a man who looked like me could hold a position of authority. But this case has never been about my title, Your Honor. It is about the hundreds of ordinary citizens who drove through Crestview and did not have a badge of their own to protect them, the single mothers whose rent money was stolen under the guise of asset forfeiture, the young people who were thrown against the hoods of their cars and terrorized simply for existing in a town that deemed them undesirable." Marcus stepped away from the podium, stepping closer to the defense table. "Harlan Crow believed he was the law," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a terrifying quiet intensity. "Today, he will find out what the law actually is." Judge Desmond Langford nodded slowly. He looked down at Crow with profound disgust. "Mr. Crow, in my years on the bench, I have rarely seen a more brazen, vile abuse of authority. You did not protect and serve. You hunted and exploited I'm accepting the prosecution's recommendation in full. Judge Langford struck his gavel. Harlan Crow, you are hereby sentenced to 20 years, a federal penitentiary without the possibility of parole. You are remanded immediately to the custody of the United States Marshals. A choke sob escaped Crow's throat as the heavy-set federal marshals grabbed him by the arms, hauling him to his feet. As they dragged him toward the side door of the courtroom, Crow finally looked back. He looked past his expensive defense attorneys, past the crowded gallery, and met the eyes of Marcus Langford. Marcus did not smile. He did not gloat. He simply stood perfectly straight, the ultimate embodiment of the justice Crow had spent his entire career mocking. The heavy wooden door slammed shut, sealing Crow's fate. That evening, the sun set beautifully over the state capitol. Marcus Langford walked out of the Department of Justice building, his leather briefcase in hand. The air was crisp and cool. He walked down the stone steps and approached his midnight blue Mercedes S-Class parked in its reserved spot. He slid into the driver's seat, the familiar smell of premium leather welcoming him. He started the engine and pulled out onto the highway. As he drove home, the roads felt different. The flashing lights of a police cruiser no longer meant a predatory trap was waiting in the dark, thanks to one midnight traffic stop. A corrupt empire had fallen, and the scales of justice had finally been balanced. What an absolute masterclass in taking down a corrupt system. Attorney General Marcus Langford did not just get revenge, he dismantled a criminal empire operating right under the public's nose. It just goes to show that power trips and prejudice will eventually cross the wrong person. If you loved watching justice served cold to Sergeant Crow and the corrupt Crestview officials, please hit that like button. Share this incredible story with your friends to spread the word. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more epic stories of instant karma and legal takedowns.